Hello, everybody. I've changed my method of recording my voice. So I'm now using uh, what is called a Blue Yeti microphone that I purchased from Facebook Marketplace yesterday for $40, and it's working fine. So that's really good. And so from now on, you will not necessarily always see that thing on my head. Okay. Hopefully, you'll still hear the sound reasonably well. So I wanted to discuss today what I've issued on Twitter and on social media. Basically, a summary of my main recommendations from my public health review over the last roughly 2 years. It's less than 2 years now. I think 2 years will be complete only by the end of February, but this is roughly 2 years, and it's a kind of midpoint for my review. I've been talking about these issues quite a bit, so you know almost everything. But it will be good to know that there are some concrete recommendations coming from my work, which hopefully will be accepted in due course by the profession, by the policymakers and politicians, and the general public. It's very important that general public understand why I have been making these recommendations, and I've been providing all possible evidence for everyone to have a look at. So let me summarize my main recommendations. The first one is probably the most important, given the fact that the lockdowns caused a level of harm that is completely unprecedented in human history. Nothing of this sort was ever implemented before COVID lockdowns, and they were particularly severe in Melbourne. And I can speak from personal experience, but even otherwise, all across the world, the harms caused were enormous. So these lockdowns are a form of quarantine. But as we go through the whole, literature on quarantine, it's quite obvious that this particular idea of restraining healthy people, the movements of healthy people, is simply a bad idea. The correct idea, which is very simple and common sense idea, is that those who are sick, normally they don't want to get out of their house and their bed anyway. But if they do, that the most they should go to the hospital, and everybody else should carry on with their lives. There are lots and lots of sicknesses in our lives, a lot of diseases. We cannot possibly be all sheltering ourselves somehow in the fear of getting something or the other in due course. And the idea of quarantine, where the healthy are, held off, the ones who've got no symptoms, nothing, um, then they basically could be carrying a disease, and it doesn't really mean anything because disease is everywhere. The germs and bacteria are everywhere. We should not be, restraining our normal life just because some crazy idea has come through in the last 650 years, with the plague quarantines first, and later with a few others. All these ideas are completely harmful and don't work for very good reason. So that is my first main recommendation. This also, by the way, includes attempts to have a subsection of the entire population being quarantined. For example, focused protection. I don't think that's a good idea, and I've discussed it elsewhere. Now, if quarantine or restraining the healthy is not a good idea, what should we do? And the answer is pretty common sense as well. I've already mentioned it. The sick should stay at home or should go to hospital. They should isolate from others. There has been an attempt in the past for shut-ins. What are called shut-ins is where the entire family of gets shut in a particular house if one person is sick. Well, that's the wrong thing. The person who's sick should be isolated if possible in the house, and if it's not possible in the house, should be taken to a hospital where they're properly isolated from others. All other people in the family should carry on with their normal lives. Shutting down families with a shut in is a bad idea. The healthy people, they should not be shut in. And so, what we need for that is a very strong isolation system. We need more funding for that. We need what I call the isolation hospital system. And I'm hoping that that idea, which is going to be pretty expensive, and I'll talk about it elsewhere. And I've written a lot about it already. Uh, that's the kind of thing that should substitute for this absolutely horrendous and useless and worthless and dangerous idea of quarantine. The other main thing that's come out from my review, which is what a bit of a surprise to me, is that it was nothing to do with the modern science that improved our life expectancy as a species. Most of these improvements have come through from simple things like better food, more food, and better housing, and that's all part of the capitalism, the evolution of the capitalist model of economic development, which started roughly around 1750. And in that process, we managed to see vast improvements in the health and well-being and life expectancy of people, reduction in infant mortality, etc., well before anything came to the front, like sanitation and least of all vaccines and so on. So around 75 to 80% of the improvements in human life expectancy have come through from capitalism. This is not well known and well understood. I think it needs to be more understood and well appreciated. And what that means is that public health needs to advocate capitalism very strongly, and particularly in third world countries like India, which are hardcore socialists. And so these countries will hopefully adopt capitalism, the methods and processes of capitalism, and thereby become rich. They will get the people who will be able to afford toilets and other facilities in their house, because it's not simply the sewerage. You can't build a sewerage when people are living in huts. It doesn't work. So you need to have overall development of society, which is what is my third recommendation. That is, promote capitalism very strongly. Do not, under any circumstances, is my recommendation, do not fund the third world. There is nothing more harmful than foreign aid, and it is the worst way to do development. The other one is the vaccines. It has become very clear to me that the hype about vaccines is overdone. Undoubtedly, vaccines are a good thing, but they played a very small role. There are really 1 to 2% of life expectancy, is my estimate, that they've improved the global life expectancy, particularly in the West, by a very small amount. They've done much more than that in the third world countries, but for that is a separate analysis, and for that that is not the reason why we should be promoting vaccines. Okay. So vaccines should be part of normal life. People should take vaccines and so on. They should have the information, but don't overdo it, is my recommendation. The next recommendation is, of course, the one I've been harping on for quite some time now, is the abolition of all forms of vaccine mandates. And I'm very happy that the recent inquiry by the U.S. Congress or whatever, they actually condemned the idea of vaccine mandates. Well, they need to create laws in the USA and all over the world to prohibit vaccine mandates. Even for the medical profession, if you're a nurse or a doctor, you should have the common sense and training to take a vaccine when it's required. There is no need to mandate any vaccine on anybody. Give the information and let them choose. And I've got lots and lots of information about this in one of my books, and I won't go into details right now. The other one that has come to me relatively recently in my mind as part of the review is that currently there's a free for all, where in which the any Tom, Dick, and I call Ferguson after Neil Ferguson, any Tom, Dick, and Ferguson can go to the press with some random idea, and the press will then pick it up and terrorize everybody, saying, "Oh, millions are going to die." Well, that's complete nonsense. The other is, even good ideas like focus protection, which I believe is wrong, are promoted in the media by, because a doctor goes to a group of doctors goes to the media and then starts promoting it. And so the debate becomes really a public debate. And it should be a public debate, but not in this manner. It should be well structured. And therefore, because all these non pharmaceutical interventions, NPIs, are effectively prophylactics, they prevent disease. They should therefore form part of the approval process of the drug regulator. In the case of USA, the FDA. And in that process, for example, I give an example where somebody like Ferguson or even like, Jay Bhattacharya will go to the CDC or whatever the respective agency in their country, and that agency will then make a detailed recommendation to the FDA. The FDA will then conduct its own analysis with public consultation. So there will be a cost benefit analysis, there'll be all the scientific data, and let the public then decide and the FDA decide that this is a good or bad idea, and let that then become formalized as a recommendation or an intervention that is allowed. Any intervention that does not pass through this process should not be considered to be a valid recommendation. Just like a drug that doesn't get FDA approval is not considered valid for purposes of wide publicity. So also the press should not be publicizing things which are not approved by the FDA. Now, I have a lot of concerns about the FDA. I won't go into details at the moment, but I think there is a way out in which some such formalized process of approvals of NPIs is necessary. The thing that I referred to about Ferguson is the epidemiological models, the mathematical models. These are an absolute disaster. We know it from our experience. We have studied it extensively. They're completely wrong, bogus, worthless, but they're not just useless. They're actually positively dangerous. I call them weapons of mass destruction. And I think that's the point about models, that these models must be completely destroyed. I don't recommend destroying books and such things. But for the purposes of education and public health, that should not be a part of the courses of public health. Anyone can go and make their own models and do whatever they like, but it's not part of the standard approval for any NPI, nor is any of that information valuable or worthwhile to be used in informing anything about epidemics and so on. The other one that is completely worthless is the use of ethics in public health, and that needs to go completely. However, ethics in private health and medicine is fine. Hippocratic oath, etc., is a good idea, and that should continue. The other thing which is I'm recommending is the complete waste of time of the general public through useless things like health guidelines, and then somebody goes and says, okay, we want to tax the burgers, etc., or sugar, etc., and stop people from eating. But sorry, this is not the same as tobacco. This is pretty much food, and food which can be which has got many good and bad points. A thing which is not universally bad is not something you can go and regulate like this. And neither are you that competent or capable to provide health guidelines to people. There are so many opinions on these matters, and I think this is something which public health should not dabble in. This is pure quackery. This is witchcraft. This is, those tribal doctors or whatever you call them, the village doctors. No, we don't want this kind of nonsense. That should be completely removed from public health. The other point that I'm recommending is the complete rewrite of all the textbooks in public health. I've never seen more hodgepodge, more junk than in public health. You pick up any public health textbook, you'll be quite shocked to see the kind of garbage that is being taught. Nothing to do with science, a lot of ideology, a lot of speculation, and then they say that they're giving degrees to people to become masters of public health or whatever. Absolute nonsense. We want all the textbooks to be completely rewritten to focus on empirical scientific stuff. The real contributions to human health have been made by capitalism and sanitation. These are where the focus should be. The idea of quarantine being very harmful, that's where the focus should be. Things like social justice, racism, or climate change, the amount of garbage in public health is to be seen, to be believed. I just cannot imagine what they do, and I would not have imagined if I had not gone and read the stuff. So we need to completely rewrite all the public health textbooks. The other one that's come out very clearly, the more I dig into the quarantine issues, the more I find confusion, chaos, lack of diligent analysis, and so on. So basically, we need quarantine studies. The first promoter or student of quarantine was Charles MacLean, and that's more than 200 years ago. And so since then, there have been very few, virtually none, who have devoted significant amount of their time to the study of quarantine in a scientific manner. We don't want models, okay? So we want real science, empiricism. And that's the kind of stuff that's completely missing. So I've been doing some work on that, and I'm hoping that that kind of stuff will be taken up as a major sub branch of public health so that experts in that area are generated on a regular basis in vast numbers, because very soon there'll be something or the other, and they keep cooking up these things all the time. And then there'll be a huge panic, and then the people will demand lockdowns. And somebody has to stand up and say, sorry, but the evidence is completely against it. So we need not only FDA to ban the quarantine, but we need experts in this area who studied this carefully for many years, and therefore they can inform the public that this is a very bad idea. They should then guide them towards better isolation and stop the panic. Which reminds me, one of the main findings of my review is that panic has been a main problem across almost all these pandemics for 600 years. And public health has not studied this properly. What they do need to study, and also the fact that doctors and nurses are the ones to panic the most. Once they study these things properly, I believe a full-fledged discipline called panic studies should be started. And once that discipline is there, with maybe some psychologists, etc., hopefully we find solutions to stop the panic. Currently, the amount of panic that we've seen in 2022 was to be seen to be believed. I've gone through the panic myself. I've seen many others who panicked. We are the irrational animal as humans. Our irrationality dominates our rationality quite significantly. We need to study our irrationality very carefully and see what can be done to reduce it. And of course, I've recommended the setting up of a Center for Scientific Public Health. Currently, there's not a single scientific public health center anywhere in the world. They're all a bunch of ideological, haphazard quack centers, the quackery, centers of quackery, or whatever you call it. And that's the kind of thing we need to change. We need to develop not one, maybe many centers for scientific public health. I do not agree with government funding of any of these centers, so they should be all in the private sector. They need to completely restructure, reconceptualize, reprove everything from scratch based on science and evidence, not ideology and ethics. A key point that I've suggested is that these centers should always be headed by an economist. So in the first case, I would recommend Paul Fridges, who is, in my view, a really phenomenal specialist in the field of human well-being and happiness. And his cost-benefit analysis of the UK lockdowns was the one that guided me in my drafting of the Australian lockdowns cost-benefit analysis. I've learned a lot from his work. He is absolutely a guru in the subject. Such kind of people, and I'm not just mentioning him, but such kind of people need to be the head of these centers of scientific public health. Why? Because economics is actually all about opportunity costs and trade-offs. The fact that somebody's health is affected is no. Doctors consider specific diseases. They specialize in specific diseases, but all these diseases are only one part of the whole picture. And in the whole picture, we find that overspending or over resourcing a particular disease might mean that you are underspending on something else. That's the kind of specialization of economists. And so I would want economists to be the head of scientific public health. Public health should no longer be under the control of doctors. We've seen that they're simply incompetent for that job. They're not trained. Maybe some of them, might have the knowledge, but overall, the doctors do not understand public health. They cannot, because they're basically focused on very specific disease. They don't have the society-wide perspective. And that's the kind of recommendation on the Center for Scientific Public Health. I've made a number of minor recommendations. I won't go into details. They're in my book 11 or something. I'm collecting them at the moment. You can have a browse through those recommendations. I won't open and discuss it right now. And that broadly covers off, I guess, some of my main suggestions or recommendations at this stage. Now, I need to finish my review. There is a vast amount of work and further research I need to undertake. I also need to undertake a strong amount, a lot of editing and so on. I keep asking people, nobody's suggesting, nobody's helping me out in any way, unfortunately. But I keep asking for help. I need more I need research assistants, not more. I need some researchers, any research assistant who will help me to do things that I cannot possibly do myself, like go deep into certain areas for which I don't have the time. And even with whatever I have, it'll take me at least 2 more years to finish my review. Once I finish the review, I'll be ending my interaction with on public health, and I'll move on to other areas of interest to me, such as education and so on. But at this moment, I'm still involved in public health, and this is my summary of my findings so far. Thank you very much.